The scene unfolded like a movie, but this was no Hollywood production. It was real life, raw, and unfolding in real time. Just moments ago, federal agents from the IRS executed a raid on the defendant's private property, a sprawling estate that had long been the subject of whispers and speculation. The defendant, known for cultivating an image of control and composure, was visibly shaken, his confidence collapsing under the weight of federal scrutiny. From the moment agents arrived, the atmosphere was tense. Security gates opened with mechanical precision, vehicles rolled up the long driveway, and men in suits, federal agents, unmarked but unmistakably authoritative, began their work. Cameras captured the precision, the coordination, and the sheer scale of the operation. Reporters, who had been tipped to the timing, scrambled to get the perfect vantage point, knowing that this was a defining moment that could go viral within hours. Inside the property, the defendant attempted to maintain control. Staff members were directed to cooperate, documents were gathered, and the air was thick with anxiety. But control is a fragile illusion. In the span of just a few minutes, it became clear that the defendant was not prepared for this level of intrusion. The IRS agents methodically searched offices, safes, and digital storage devices, cataloging evidence that would soon play a central role in potential criminal proceedings. The collapse began subtly. His hands trembled, and his usual posture of authority faltered. When confronted with the extent of the documentation being seized, the defendant's composure broke. He paced, muttered under his breath, and at one point leaned heavily against a marble column for support. Witnesses described the scene as surreal, a man who had built an empire of control and power reduced to visible panic in less than an hour. Federal raids like this are meticulously planned. Agents execute them based on warrants, legal precedent, and a careful assessment of the potential evidence. They operate quickly, systematically, and with minimal discretion. But what makes moments like this captivating, why they capture public attention, is the human reaction. When the law arrives at the doorstep, it doesn't knock politely. It doesn't wait for emotions to settle. It lands, and the consequences are immediate. What had precipitated the raid? According to sources close to the investigation, there were long-standing questions about undisclosed accounts, offshore holdings, and potential tax discrepancies that had escalated over time. While the defendant publicly maintained that all filings were compliant, federal authorities evidently believed otherwise. The raid was not just symbolic, it was strategic. Every document seized, every account uncovered would add to a narrative that the government could use to demonstrate patterns of concealment, intent, and financial misconduct. As the search continued, the defendant's breakdown intensified. Family members and aides watched helplessly, realizing that this was no longer a matter of negotiation or damage control. The procedural reality of a federal raid leaves little room for improvisation. Agents cannot pause for emotions, nor can they accept reassurances. The law is impartial, unyielding, and final in its execution. And in that environment, the defendant's panic was both understandable and inevitable. Observers described the moment as cinematic, the defendant retreating to a private study, the sound of paper shuffling, the murmurs of agents, and the flash of cameras capturing every reaction. The narrative that had been built over months of media appearances, confidence, composure, untouchable authority, was dismantled in real time. 1 minute, a poised figure commanding attention. The next, a man visibly overwhelmed by the machinery of justice. For analysts, this breakdown is more than drama. It is indicative of the stakes involved in high-profile federal investigations. The psychological burden of being under scrutiny by federal authorities can be immense. When the IRS arrives with a raid, it is a legal signal that investigations have moved from theory to action. It demonstrates that authorities are prepared to document evidence, take control, and escalate proceedings. The human response, panic, breakdown, or collapse, is a side effect of facing irreversible consequences. Importantly, federal raids are methodical. Agents document every step, ensuring that the chain of custody is preserved and that every piece of evidence can withstand legal scrutiny. For the defendant, this procedural rigor becomes an inescapable reality. It is not just about documents. It is about accountability. Each item seized becomes a potential thread in a larger legal tapestry, one that can later be woven into indictments, court filings, and prosecutorial arguments. Despite the chaos, the operation was efficient. Agents moved through the property, identifying financial records, digital devices, and correspondence. Each seizure was carefully cataloged, photographed, and secured. For the defendant, the realization that these items would be scrutinized, potentially under subpoena, added layers to the stress. It is one thing to deal with media scrutiny, another to face the full force of federal enforcement. From a narrative perspective, this moment crystallizes several truths about high-profile legal confrontations. First, Preparation and image cannot replace accountability. No matter how controlled or poised an individual may appear, federal authority introduces unpredictability that cannot be managed through media statements or public appearances. Second, human reactions, panic, breakdown, collapse, are often as revealing as any document. They demonstrate awareness, anticipation, and sometimes guilt in ways that testimony or filings cannot. The broader implications of this raid are significant. The evidence gathered will likely inform ongoing investigations, potential indictments, and future courtroom proceedings. For the public, the moment of breakdown becomes a symbol. The idea that no one, regardless of wealth or status, is above the reach of the law. The footage, the images, and the commentary will circulate widely, shaping perceptions of accountability, justice, and consequence. Legal experts note that the psychological impact of such raids is deliberate, if not intentional. By demonstrating the seriousness of enforcement, federal authorities create a climate where cooperation, transparency, and compliance are incentivized. When the defendant broke down, it was not merely a personal moment, it was an illustration of the law's capacity to disrupt carefully constructed narratives and force accountability. As agents concluded their search, the defendant, though shaken, was escorted to a private area to consult with counsel. The cameras continued to record, reporters filed notes, and social media erupted. Analysts, legal commentators, and the public began dissecting the implications of every action, word, and gesture observed during the raid. The breakdown, the panic, and the procedural sweep all became part of a larger story, one that will dominate discussions for weeks to come. This incident, while dramatic, is also instructive. Federal investigations are not abstract. They are actionable, precise, and psychologically impactful. Every step, from warrants to seizures to documentation, demonstrates the machinery of law in motion. The defendant's collapse, the media coverage, and the public reaction are the human and cultural byproducts of this rigorous legal process. As the day concluded, the estate was secured, agents departed, and the legal process moved forward. The defendant's panic will be analyzed, dissected, and remembered, not because it was theatrical, but because it revealed the weight of accountability and the inescapable presence of law in high-stakes financial investigations. In short, this was more than a raid. It was a defining moment that combined legal precision, human reaction, and public scrutiny, a moment that captures exactly why federal enforcement carries such power and influence. And for the defendant, it was a lesson in how quickly control can vanish when confronted with the machinery of justice.